All right, so by request, I was asked to upload one where I lose, and I've played three full sets of the tournament today, which really isn't a lot of magic for a full day, but well, first of all, I ran into a lot of blue, which makes the whole thing take quite a bit longer. And secondly, um, today was a little bit rough for me. I had a migraine for most of the day. So anyway, um, the first one I played in, I stomped it. I won. The next two I took second, and I was going to use the one where I took second as the video for for one where I lose. But the problem is that in that the reason I lost, I drew. I had a perfectly good hand. I had like 6 mana on turn 2 or 3 or something crazy. And then I proceeded to draw back-to-back black spells turn after turn after turn, and actually finished the game without ever drawing black, except for on the turn where my opponent cast Emrakul. Then I finally found a black source, so I could cast my first black spell, which was a little bit awkward for me. So, and it was hard cast, by the way, the Emrakul was. So, had I drawn black any other time, I would have been fine, I think, in that game. So I didn't think that would be interesting. With that said, I don't know if the last video has the changes to the deck, but here they are. Dust Bowl is out, Flagstones is out, Cavern of Souls is in, and we're down a land. And then the deck has main deck Legacies of Lore, which is pretty good against Baral, and generally just a solid card. Really awesome if you can steal a Bird of Paradise and so forth. One thing the deck doesn't have that I do miss, and I think I'd really like to put it back in here, is Fire Ice. Unfortunately, I'm just not quite sure how to fit Fire Ice in the deck. So if anyone has a suggestion, that would be excellent. Not just, it helps to have suggestions of cards, and then I try to look for slots to fit them in if it makes sense. But if you can also suggest a slot, if you want, that would be interesting as well. If you have any ideas. So, and the reason I want Fire Ice is a couple of different things. One, it gives me a way to untap the orb on any given turn, or rather tap the orb, which is the more to the point. So at the end of my opponent's turn, I can ice the orb, get all my mana back. Two, it allows me to push spells through. It's an end of turn play that I can do against blue to tap down one of their islands so that I can untap and try to force something to resolve. And three, it's a combo card with Dak Faden's ultimate. You can ultimate Dak, and then anything you ice is yours. Or if they have two creatures, you can play fire, target them both, and snag them to come work for you, which is pretty awesome, considering generally Dak's ultimate is pretty worthless. And previously, I actually had, of course, Pyroblast in the deck. And if you decided you were only going to add one blast into the deck, that would be the one, because you can also do something similar with Dak's ultimate. And there was one game in particular where I actually ultimated Dak and then Pyroblasted my opponent's forest. And because I had kept them, I had them suppressed, but that was during the Crucible strip mine days. My opponent had managed to sneak in a couple of forests using a ramp spell, and I pyroblasted one and then stripped them right back to where we were at, and then they scooped. But like I said, that was during the strip mine days. So anyway, let's check out some games, and you can see here is the league where I lost in round 2 and then went on to win the rest of them. And it was a pretty good loss, so hopefully you will enjoy seeing it. Unfortunately, some of these games go quite long because they are blue, I believe. And against them, you just have to be patient, or else you're going to have a short game, and it'll be a short game with you losing rather than a long game with you winning. I mean, if you can pull off a long game, sure, go for it. So I had to mulligan my opening hand. I had to mulligan again, and I get a jeweled amulet hand here, and I'm playing against, oh, this wasn't blue. Black, green, red, white. Everything but. So I get first turn jeweled amulet, charge. So when my opponent didn't have some kind of scary play there. Oh, Wasteland is nice, but I'm hurting for mana, so I don't think wasting my opponent. I think that's actually helping him out. I'm going to place Pack Rat. It's very strange, so I do Wasteland him because that stalls for a turn before he can activate it. Plus, I'm sitting on 3 mana now, and I have Stoic. And I have the Disrupt, and I was hoping I might get a target. Well, Thalia is going to be a problem, so I need to get rid of that. And then I top deck Tithe, which is fantastic right there. So I'll go ahead and play an untapped Hallowed Fountain so that I could potentially charge the Jeweled Amulet and Disrupt. No dice there, so we'll just charge. And then I draw Cavern of Souls, which allows me to cast Breya with Disrupt mana up. Opponent's just going pack ratting, and he's discarding like Smuggler's Copter here, a land, not too much stuff there. So with that in mind, I drew Supreme Verdict, and that's all I was hoping to do. And my opponent's used the last of his cards on Pack Rat and a Stoneforge Mystic, which I'm going to hard cast to force the will to stop. And I rip a Night's Whisper, which is huge, an Edict, which means after I clean up these rats, we're going to be in good shape. Sends the team. I block, 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 attempt to kill one of the rats so that I can kill the other rat. Opponent, of course, makes them all into 5/5, so I take 1 point of damage from unblocked rats and get the last card out of his hand, which is what I wanted, so we'll Verdict. He top decks his Jitte. Can't do anything about that. And then he plays his commander. So end of turn, I'm going to Edict, holding control, disrupt my Edict, and pay for it because I need to cycle the disrupt off. It's pretty clear that I'm not going to have any targets or, I mean, he's got no cards in hand at all. So I just want to dig for more valuable cards, although City of Brass wasn't exactly what I had in mind. Opponent recasts his commander, so I'm going to re-kill his commander, I believe. First I charge Jeweled Amulet, though, and send the team. See if he'll make a foolish block. He does not. So I'll go ahead and just kill that commander off. So he draws and plays his other commander. He equips it up, plays a land for the turn. And, Jeweled Amulet served me well, but it's time to go. Amulet spends a mana and goes away, and Breya goes away. So we need more guys. And I'm looking at this like, oh, shoot, maybe I could have waited because I'm going to come up, I think, short here. So I'm going to play Breya. It's uncounterable. That's always helpful against the only guy in the entire league who's not playing blue. Anyway, plays, well, I guess there's mono green out there. Anyway, so he DTs right into a Phyrexian Arena off the top deck, which is unfortunate, but I wasn't able to spell Pierce it. He had just 1 mana too many. And I'm holding these kind of ugly situational counter spells that are great against blue, but so bad at this point. He does at least give me a target for Metal Misstep in the Stormkirk Noble. So that's nice. Alright, so I'm going to charge up Legacy's Allure. Legacy's Allure is a very interesting combo with Breya because you can actually steal things that are much bigger than what you should be able to steal. Alright, so after combat, let's go ahead and kill his... Oh, yeah, so I forgot. So, and I think my opponent forgot too. So anyway, my opponent had taken a lot of damage. So when he played his commander, I don't sack to kill it. I actually attack for 6. He's at 12. And I figured he would just chump block and I wouldn't have to sack. But he actually lets it all through. So he drops to 6 and then I just spend 4 mana and throw a Talisman Breya and 2 birds at his face. Or whatever it was. 2 talismans and 2 birds at his face. And that's it. He takes 6 and keels over. So that was game 1. And so we move to game 2. Okay. I guess I have it open twice or something. I'm not quite sure, but anyway. All right, so here's a game loss. Since y'all are interested in what can happen, and like I said, just pure mana screws, not interesting. So here's a real game. So I'm playing against Selvala, and you'll see I lost a dice roll. I kept an okay hand, but it's not solid. It's got ramp, but what it doesn't have is any way to go get a Wrath of God, and that's what you need against Selvala. You need a way to go get a Wrath of God. But I thought I didn't quite work out the right way to sequence my plays here, and it ends up costing me big time. So my opponent's down to, he's got tons of mana. He's got 4 cards in hand. I thought I could wasteland the Hollows and then Vindicate Selvala, but he puts a shield up. I'd forgotten that my opponent might have enough foresight to do that, unfortunately. So I Vindicate a Forest, but it's just not, it's not good. not good at all. My opponent has, it does stall him long enough. Like if I rip Wrath of God here, I'm set, right? Boom, no Wrath, and here's where I mess up. So what I should have done is cast Notion Thief and drawn a card off Notion Thief, and then if my opponent casts anything big, I get to draw off of that as well. But I don't. And he's got the biggest bad of them all, Prime Time, who basically says game over when he comes down. It's basically green's 6 mana, I win the game now, you lose. Still, if I had maybe a Wrath here, I might have something going on. So I use Jace to dig. Okay, so I've got Armageddon, that's half of what I need. So if I don't die here, and my opponent does have to pay for Pact, which should slow him down a little bit. So if I don't die here, if I can draw and then dig and then find myself a board clear, combined with an Armageddon, I may be able to win this game still. But I put myself in a very bad spot by letting him draw a card off of Prime Time and me not drawing a card. That's a huge deal. Also, I have no defense right now if he wants to continue to draw even more cards or, make any other silly plays that, like I could have been spinning through my deck a lot faster if I had Notion Thief out. And I got to remember that in the future. Like, Notion Thief's actually quite good against some of these green decks. Anyway, my opponent's just, casting a turn 6 Emrakul, so whatever. And that's how you lose to green. They just get the nuts, you get the nothing. And so, as you can see, and in that game, I've cut the Abyss, but if I put the Abyss in, what would happen? The ranger that searches for a forest would have died, and nothing would have changed at all, which is why I cut the Abyss. I found out that, oops, if I don't, I'll spin through the rest, so just, for your interest. So if I do not Wrath, if you don't Wrath the board against Selvala, or generally a lot of the green decks, then you just lose. And if you Wrath, you win. And that's pretty much the entire math of it. And that's why I switched out the Abyss for Supreme Verdict, which also is good against Breya. Okay, this guy's playing Olaro, and look at this fantastic draw. All right, we're going to just come roaring out the gates here. I imprinted a Demonic too. You don't see that too often, but for a first turn Confident, I'll do it. He's got Path. Doggone it. All right, well, that's okay though. Path is not swords, and not being swords actually means he's set me up with a really nice early gush here. After gushing, I'll brainstorm, and then I'll use the opportunity to get a Mox Hope on a Winter Orb into play with a Mana Lake backing it up. All right, nothing happens, so let's charge the Jeweled Amulet, I think. Oh no, I'm unwilling to tap out because of the risk of disenchant. So on this turn, I just charge Jeweled Amulet and then pick up the land that I charged it with. So no loss at all of tempo by not charging on the previous. So I have basically, Jeweled Amulet's just basically 1 mana tap, put a Lotus Petal into play. A legendary Lotus Petal into play, since you can't charge multiple charges on it. Okay, opponent does nothing. So I got Scroll Rack down, which is pretty important against this deck as well. I mean, he's playing a control match, and I mean, he is so outclassed in mana right now. And now with Scroll Rack, he's going to get outclassed in cards as well. He's got 5 cards to 5 cards. So we're both holding 5 cards, but I have 7 permanents in play to his 4, which is kind of amazing. All right, so I go ahead and fetch and then hardcast Breya. I'm trying to tempt him to, it turns on Stubborn Denial, and I'm trying to tempt him to do exactly what he does here. Wrath, I'm going to go ahead and just Mana Leak it. The reason I don't Stubborn Denial right here is because Stubborn Denial is a negate for 1. I don't mind using the Jeweled Amulet. I'll just charge it next turn anyway, trivially. And I would much prefer to use Mana Leak while I can and sit on the Stubborn Denial's negate power in case my opponent decided not to scoop. But I'll take the quit. And that's kind of a cool game because you actually got to see how awesome Jeweled Amulet can be. It's kind of like Ancestral. It's kind of like the Ancestral where it's directly, the value of Amulet goes up the closer to your opening hand that you find it. So Ancestral, Amulet, they're both just like that. So is Land Tax, so is Weathered Wayfarer. But all these cards cost 1, so that you play an abundance of them, and hopefully each opening hand has at least one of them. And if not, then maybe you have a way to go fetch them if it seems good to do so. All right, so opponent has, I mean, we've also got the Moxes in there for the same reason. So anyway, opponent has Chrome Mox, so he's playing Animar. And so my plan to, I had this Winter Orb early, and my plan to make that orb do good things is set back. So I know that his Animar's 3 mana, so I go ahead and Merchant Scroll for Daze over Force of Will, because Daze he won't walk into, Force of Will he will. And I'm actually just trying to buy time here. So in his turn he spends mana for Fauna Shaman, so this is a great time for me to Winter Orb, because I'm 1 artifact away from having an Opal active under the orb. And even though he has Chrome Mox going, you note that this turn he still can't play Animar because of Daze. Alright, so he can finally play Animar now, but it's still very difficult for him to work through the Daze to get anything actually on the board. And the other thing that the Daze did was it encouraged him to walk into land tax, which was important. I had to, between the Daze, tax, and orb, it's pretty much like it's a tremendous push to my opponent to go do what I want, which is give me my Ancestral off of the tax. All right, so now we've got active Forbid if we want it, but I decide that what I want is active Opal more than I want active Forbid. So I play Breya, and since I still have the Daze, I feel relatively safe here. Like on this turn, my opponent really couldn't cast the creature that comes into play and destroys Winter Orb unless he also had the land to go with it, because Animar isn't actually reducing costs yet. Anyway, so my opponent Fauna Shaman's not using his Chrome Mox for some insane reason, probably involving it being fairly late. And look at that, Rex Sage. I actually think about it and I decide what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it go, sack the orb, and kill his Fauna Shaman, who I think is a bigger problem and doing less for me than, like, I think the orb is, I think it's done enough, and now my opponent's actually somewhat favored. I was very glad he didn't kill Opal right there, actually. So, because I've got Forbid in a full hand, and that's a pretty good spot to be in. I shouldn't have attacked with Thopter here. That was just absolutely foolish. In no way am I the aggro player in this match. I am, in fact, in almost every match, I am the control player. So one always fabricate, and I gave some thought to Stubborn Denying it, but then I thought, well, no, I'll just counter the artifact he goes and gets. Unfortunately, the artifact he went and got was Phyrexian Metamorph, who I cannot Stubborn Denial. So I hadn't considered that. And then he's playing a bunch of stuff that I'm just not willing to forbid at all, because I'm holding Mystical Teachings, which is the other reason why I wanted to kill the orb. So this Menagerie thing lets him play creatures off the top of his library, and he can see them, but I can't. So if his top deck is not a creature or not playable, I have no idea what it is, unlike cards like Future Sight and so forth. And that's pretty brutal if his top of library ends up being artifact creatures or things that he can abuse the Animar mana with. The other thing is that Vizier also lets him play cast creatures using any color mana. So that's just like double gross, but it does not have anything to do with, like, it doesn't change reduced costs. So it doesn't allow him to actually use Animar's cost reduction to pay for any color mana requirement. So because of that, I just let it go. And I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but we have run into a very long delay. I don't right know what's happening. I'm getting the spinny wheel of death though. Okay, I'll try to restart it, and then we can hopefully finish that game, because I think it's interesting, and I think you'll like not just that game, but I think the next one was actually the most interesting one of the set. More interesting, unless you're just super interested in how I lose, and I may suppose that may be more interesting for you as well. But I actually really like the last game. Is so awesome. It's worth waiting for. So let me just get this restarted. The problem is I'm running OBS and trying to upload the winning video from today, and that's very taxing on my system. It's been uploading for hours, so I really don't want this to crash. But I will add it to the playlist. We're very close to having this thing being done, actually. So let's click before Magic Online does anything terrible to me. Let's just get that in the commander group. Man, I'll publish it once we're done. Let's hope Magic Online. Every once in a while, Magic Online gets so bad it will actually crash my entire laptop, and then I lose everything, hours of work. So keep your fingers crossed. Let's get logged in. We'll try to go back to the game, and then we'll see what happens. And that's assuming I can actually log in here. I hear my processor whining. Okay, this is good. Promising. I think we need to go to play lobby. I guess I gotta click on a deck. Or not? I'm not really sure. Okay, let's get the details here if we can. Sorry, this is taking a little bit of time. It's rather a painful delay for someone that's trying to make a video, but Magic Online in general is just rather painful. I think it's a specialty. I wish these games were 25 minutes though. 20 minutes is just so rough. Yep, that's indeed the deck. Can we go back to where are my games? What in the world? Okay, since I can't seem to get the games this way, let's try it another way. We'll go to account and game history. And sorry for all this delay. I think it must have been the last two games here. I must have rolled over to today for the last two games, which is kind of convenient in this case. Okay, so let's see if we can. Is it the same game, and can we get through it? Yeah, this is the game against Hanamar. Okay. So I guess we'll have to watch the beginning of that. I could try clicking, but what I found is that not only is the constant clicking super annoying if you're watching the video, but I also found that I can tell Magic Online to go faster than it can keep up with, and then I get a program crash that way too. So unfortunately, we have to rewatch the beginning of this game, and then we'll get to the portion where we left off. But it looks like it's running, so I mean, it seems like it's going to happen. It's a little painful considering we were kind of midway through the game and everything. I guess looking at it a second time, I can try to figure out if I would have done anything different. But it feels like I made the right choices, from what I can tell. It was certainly a bit of a riskier keep, considering that like stubborn. I mean, like merchant scroll for days. Like who does that, right? But it just seemed it. A lot of times, with control, you need tempo. You just need time to develop, and then you'll win against decks that are trying to race. If you can just slow them down. So I guess in hindsight, it certainly worked out. Okay, so here we are. Back to Rex Sage on the orb. We're going to kill Fauna Shaman. He doesn't use it in response. That's pretty nice. I also had to be careful here. I forgot to mention this. Of course, you may have realized that Mox Opal is only actually actively useful right now by kind of a bare minimum. I have the exact 3 I need from Breya and the Thopter because I killed the orb. So if I need to use Breya's ability, Opal will probably be the next thing to go. Although I may just I may leave it alone, with the thought being that I will replay Breya and turn Opal back on. Incidentally, one of the reasons why Mox Opal can even be played in this deck in the first place. Okay, so we got to the menagerie of, and here's why I shouldn't have attacked. I could have chump blocked and gained 5 life using Mox Opal and then Mystical Teaching. So I cost myself 5 life here. Tutor at the end of his turn. I'll go ahead and gain that life now. I decided to leave the Opal because I'm going to replay Breya, and there's no point if, I mean, there was no point in sacking the Opal when I could just sack 2 things that are about to die. I overpay for Deluge there in case he has a, in case he was able to cast a flash creature in response to the Deluge and keep Animar alive. So I Deluge for the amount I needed +1. Alright, so this turn, so I found a Cavern of Souls, which is pretty decent. And I'm able to cast Breya here with no concerns whatsoever. And Is It Boiler Works a Underground back into my hand. I've got 2 mana up thanks to Mox Opal being live. My opponent has Zealous Conscripts. That's a little scary. So in response, I'm actually going to kill his bird, let the conscripts hit, and he plays Skull Clamp, which is very worrisome as well. I'm going to take a beating, drop into 8. But I was thinking I could get him to sack Breya and kill his Chrome Mox, and since my long-term game plan is either to Yogg-Will the Orb back into play or Armageddon, having him do that was kind of him walking into what I was hoping would happen. And then he had fetched Metamorph, if you recall. I mentioned that earlier. So in response to him casting Metamorph here, I sack Breya again to kill conscripts, so his only target is a Thopter. And I figured he would just clamp it right away and draw 2 cards. But for some reason he wants to, probably because I'm at 5, he's trying to figure out how to get in and just finish me off using that Thopter. But this gives me lots of time to end of turn Factor Fiction. He splits Armageddon separate, Ravages of War separate from 2 counterspells and 2 lands. I'm taking 4 cards. And so I use the opportunity of Flashback Teachings and go get Notion Thief. I play an uncounterable Notion Thief, and at this point my opponent can no longer, his option to clamp is now gone until he can deal with the Thief. So with his last card in hand, he plays Pestermite. And since it's his last card, I'm going to go ahead and just Time Walk him with a Memory Lapse. Okay, so I'm getting more lands down, and due to knowing exactly what his hand is, I can make the Breya play here fairly with some reasonable amount of safety. So I do believe we're about to bug out, because there should be a Breya and 2 more Thopters in play. Yeah, we're gonna bug. Yeah, that's not how it went down. Okay, well, here's the bottom line. My opponent has a Pestermite, who I proceed to kill when he plays it. And he has no time on the clock, and I have 7 cards in hand, 6 of which do stuff, and 1 of which, is forbid. And the way this game plays out is I actually clear most of his team with Breya, and then I start laying down Breya, Notion Thief, Thopter Beats. And at some point I just keep my hand full, and I actually managed to beat him down and kill him before he runs out of time. I was trying to race his timer, so I actually managed to get him to 0 in 2 minutes, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, you'll have to take my word for it because this is Magic Online. All right, so the last game, this is the one that I thought was the most interesting and what I had wanted you to be able to see sooner than now. Let's cross our fingers and hope it doesn't bug out. But this was a super cool game against the Gitrog monster. Here we are playing the Frog. So I get an option to set up a Brainstorm Polluted Delta thing, but I decide I want to get the Jeweled Amulet going right away. So go ahead and charge that up. I'm trying to race him getting to 5 mana. And so that's why, so I went first turn Charge Amulet, second turn Signet. And here he plays Coercive Portal. Well, that sucks. But nothing I can do about that. So we're going to just disrupt him heavily. I'm sure he's thinking this sucks too. And then play a land. And then my opponent, for no reason I can possibly imagine, says Carnage here. And I'm like, wait, you want to kill my 2 artifact mana for like you drawing 2 cards for the rest of the game? Yes, please. Absolutely. So on the next turn I brainstorm, trying to decide how to set this up, whether or not I want to use a fetch land to shuffle away junk or play Is It Boiler Works. I don't have any junk. All of my cards are good, so I go ahead and play the Boiler Works. All right, my opponent's starting to get up to where he's going to be able to play Frog again. He is starting to feel pretty froggy. I play Weathered Wayfarer despite my opponent having Cabal Pit, thinking he's not going to use the Pit because um, he's going to want to get his Frog down. So he Grim Tutors, and I think time's up. I figured he'd get Ancient Tomb, but he gets Wasteland for the Boiler Works, which is interesting. It's definitely like he's definitely gambling that his that he's going to benefit more from taking out my lands than he would from developing his. So we'll see if that's true. He's got 3 cards in hand and Ash Barrens, and he plays Liliana. I'm going to have to force that. And I do it keeping Forbid in my hand. And end of turn, I activate with Weathered Wayfarer. Next turn, I go ahead and play Wasteland and get rid of the Cabal Pit, so that now I've got the Wayfarer on board. And I just need one more turn. And he regrows. I forgot what he regrows. Pause. Ah, excellent. Yes. So I thought he was going to regrow like Wasteland, but he regrows Liliana the Veil. So I go ahead and I'm in good shape now. I've got 4 mana, which means I can cast Forbid with buyback and activate Weathered Wayfarer. So I do, in response to his Nature's Lore, go and get Dimer Aqueducts. I'm using the Tithe trick, so after Wooded Foothills resolves, I go ahead and Forbid and buy it back. Because I know that my opponent needs to play lands. So I'm going to go ahead and use a pickup land, get that Underground Sea back into my hand, say go, if he's going to ever get his Frog down. So he's going to have to walk into the Wayfarer at some point. He does, and there's his... also, he was missing a black for Liliana, so that was the other thing. All right, Forbidden buy it back using a land off of the Dimir. All right, which means I can now actually activate Weathered Wayfarer, so I do that. Time for Azorius. We're going to pick up Tundra, pass. So we're slowly getting more and more mana. He goes for Demonic Tutor. I'm going to Forbidden buy it back, throwing away lands that were previously in play. And he gets Blighted Fen. And I top deck. Boom! Winter Orb. So let's go fetch first. I'm going to go get Ancient Tomb and we'll play Winter Orb. Now I've got 3 lands that produce 2 under an orb. It's a pretty good spot for me. My opponent, knowing I have Forbid, taps out for his commander. Okay, sounds good. Let's play the top deck war. I'm going to top deck a Crucible, apparently. And I replay Wasteland, and that's it. Unlimited Wastelands under an orb. I mean, my opponent can untap Forest the first time. He can untap Petrified Field, sack it in response to pick up a land. But it really gets pretty hairy for him there. And I'm going to be possibly using Wayfarer even further and refilling my hand while hitting land drops at least once, most likely. Plus, Breya is just about to come down, and if you look at it, if I untap Volcanic Island and the Azorius Signet, I can actually cast Breya next turn. So my opponent has to fight through this with a Breya on the way. But I just thought it was super cool. Like I don't know. I just really appreciated being able to do that trick with Weathered Wayfarer and these bounce lands. I wish I had my other one, of course, but that's the one he wastelanded. And I thought you might appreciate it as well, especially if you're using this deck and you decide and you find yourself in a similar situation. And to be perfectly honest, it had not even occurred to me, like the interaction between Forbid, Weathered Wayfarer, and these things had not even occurred to me. It wasn't even on my radar, but you get in these tight spots and you get creative, and luckily I thought of it before he was able to get his Gitrog down or his Liliana down, either one of which probably would have been game over. But yeah, this game would have been entirely different had my opponent not, if he hadn't used the Coercive Portal the way he did. Certainly I would have had extra artifact mana in play, too, but man, I don't know. It's awesome though. When do you ever see Coercive Portal actually blow up the board? I think I have one video where it did over the entire course of time that I played Coercive Portal back in the day, and here you go. Here's the second one. So an interesting card I'd been considering, Pyramid of Pantheon. No good if you're behind or if you have a slow game, but exceptionally good if you have a long game. Didn't quite make the cut, but I mean it's a Gilded Lotus, right? So you pay 1 to play it, and then you pay 2 and put a mana in. Put 2 mana in to get 1 out of any color. And the third time you do it, every time you do it, it adds a counter to it. So after it has 3 counters, so you've used it 3 times, so you've put 6 mana in and gotten 3 out. It then taps for 3 colorless of or 3 mana of any color, just like a Gilded Lotus. So if you look at the total investment, it's a 1, 2, 2, 2, but you get a rebate of 1 on those of the payments. And if you can spend it, if it's not wasted mana, then you're actually investing 1, 1, 1, 1, a grand total of 4 mana to get a Gilded Lotus, which means this thing it's slower and it's trickier to get, but ultimately it ends up being cheaper than a Gilded Lotus. Not better by any sense, yet potentially quite good, especially in a deck like this. So I actually think I'm really tempted to play with it some more, the Pyramid of the Pantheon here. But then I picture myself in those games where I'm on the back foot against like that green deck, for example, and then who has time to dink around with the Pyramids of the Pantheon when I'm like trying not to get completely, blown out. And that's why it's not in here. And so what ended up making the cut was Jeweled Amulet. This card actually reminded me of Jeweled Amulet, which is how I got it in there. But Jeweled Amulet, the ability to just get 3 mana on turn 2, or to be able to go, first turn Amulet, second turn land, cast a Signet, cast a Talisman, that kind of stuff. Those kind of plays are pretty strong. Also, the fact that it's a 0-drop that turns on Opal is really good, because you can occasionally just go, land, Mox Diamond, Jeweled Amulet, Mox Opal, and your opponent's going, oh my gosh, what just happened, right? So, I mean, it happens. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. This is your, you want to see me lose. This is how it happens. So, yeah, get out there and build some Sylvala decks and come kick my butt. Anyway, that's all I've got tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.